Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Jin Ong and I'm your host. I practice as an osteopath and psychosomatic therapist and am fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain and live the life they want, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. The time has come for another round of emotional body training. The dates are set to start in May for 10 weeks, but I would love you to join me for an information webinar first on the 22nd of April at 11 a.m. New Zealand time. This training is open to health and wellness practitioners, therapists, coaches, trainers, anyone who is actively seeing clients and wants to learn more about the mind-body connection and implementing it in a practical way. You want to take your consults a level deeper. Not only that, you want to learn how to actually facilitate an emotional release process with your clients and deliver a truly holistic approach. This course has limited spaces. I only have space for 12 people and half of them are already taken with people who have been patiently waiting on the wait list. So I would love you to join me on the 22nd of April, 11 a.m. New Zealand time for the information webinar. The link to sign up is theartoflisteningtoyourbody.com/emotional-body. I will pop that link in the podcast notes. And I'll be covering all the ins and outs of the training, what's included, what's involved, and to find out if you are the right fit to take part in this next round. I would love to see you there. Born and raised in Sydney, Australia, Leslie had lived most of his life following a conventional path, all the while sensing that there was something more to life. However, he never felt the courage to come face to face with these questions and spent many years ignoring them, seeking escape through external distractions and substance abuse. In 2013, at the age of 28, a sudden diagnosis thrust him into a 7-month-long battle with cancer. It wasn't clear at the time, but this experience proved to be a blessing in disguise and a catalyst that laid the foundation of a path to self-discovery that he continues to walk to this day. Since then, he decided to leave his highly successful corporate career of 12 years and founded Finding Space, a platform of self-expression, deep exploration, and discovery using the tools of meditation, mentorship, and rhetoric. Welcome to the podcast, Leslie. Thank you for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I am going to throw your own question back on yourself when you interviewed me on your podcast. Tell us your origin story.
Yeah. Look, I've been asked this question a few times and always struggled to, I guess, figure out how much to add in and how far to go back. But I think it's important to go all the way back to the beginning. To give context, I was born and raised in Sydney, Australia, and I still live here. First generation Australian-born Chinese, and my parents came over from Hong Kong in the late 70s, early 80s. That generic immigrant story of coming to Australia, to new land for new opportunities with little money in their pockets. And, they sort of lived that life. And in terms of giving myself and my brother the opportunities that we had, they did their best. And by no means did we have, I guess, an awesome upbringing, if you say. But they made it work, and we were never uncomfortable. But this sort of paints the picture in terms of, like, I guess, this fish out of water type experience that I had at a very early age, and as far back as I can remember. being an Asian kid, growing up in a largely Caucasian neighborhood, even the schools that I went to, primary school and high school, I was the only Asian kid. So there was a sense of, I guess, not fitting in, and maybe a underlying desire to want to fit in to some degree, and a lack of identity, if you will. So I guess a lot of my early formative years was sort of painted in this guise of jumping from one identity to another, trying to fit in to different, groups and demographics and identities and whatnot. Whether it was, the kids that played video games and were heavily into that, or, a cool kid in the cool cliques, or, the kids that experimented with drugs and alcohol at an early age, and whatever it was, I always felt a sense that I needed to fit in somehow. I needed that validation. Outside of that, I suppose, being in an Asian household, there was pressure to be a certain way to uphold respect and go down a traditional route of study, just so that we didn't have to work as hard as our parents from a laborious standpoint, from a hands-on work standpoint. They wanted us to work in offices and things like this, and I think that you had a similar experience, Jin, with your parents, wanting you to do a certain thing or go into a certain type of career. But I left school sort of not really knowing what I wanted to do, who I was, and what life was going to be outside of this, very regimented, schooling period of my life. And I just jumped from like job to job for a long time. I did uni for a couple of years, but I knew it wasn't for me. I studied finance and economics, and I just hated every single second of that. And I just could not get myself to sort of go through something that I just did not believe in. There was something that like I sort of held in myself at a very young age. Like I'm a very practical person in a sense, in that I will not do things for the sake of doing things without questioning and without knowing why. And university was one of those things for me. I did it until I just simply could not. I knew it was the biggest waste of time for me. So anyway, I mean, years of just jumping around and doing odd things here and there. I landed in the finance industry, one of the big banks in Australia, because it was the right thing to do. Finance was one of those great industries that our parents wanted us to get into, and I wanted to make my parents proud. And I spent almost 12 years there. And I did really well. From a conventional sense, from outside looking in, I was really successful. I made a lot of money, and I continued to, I could have continued to climb this corporate ladder and continue to be quote unquote successful in that regard. But at the same time, this itch or this stone in my shoe of, wondering what life was truly about was still there. Like, although I was really good at what I did in my job, I still hated it. And I did hate every moment of it. And, again, the types of things that I sought to escape from this reality that I was sort of pushing myself into was like drugs and alcohol, antidepressants, and all these sorts of things. Really just to not have to face those questions that I sort of needed to face for myself, asking why I was doing what I was doing and what it was that I potentially wanted in life outside of this, mundane 9-to-5 that I was doing. But I guess, things came to a head in 2013 when a routine checkup at the doctor's, for something that was like very minor in my mind. It was nothing major. I always thought that I was a healthy person, but this checkup, it resulted and came back with a cancer diagnosis. And really, it was one of those things that came out of the blue and just really pulled the rug from underneath my feet. And it shifted my life trajectory for sure. Like, it was one of those moments where I sort of felt, I was given that ultimatum. I had to ask myself those hard questions. And yeah, so that sort of set me on a pretty long sort of journey that continues on to this day of self-discovery and just figuring out who I was and what I represented as an individual, and what sort of inherent values and principles I innately held, like underneath all the layers of cultural and societal conditioning. So I guess, yeah, that's like sort of the condensed version of my story. So I'll leave it up to you which sort of thread you want to pull.
Yep, many threads out of that. Thank you for sharing, and we will dive into all of those parts. Now, one thing that I would love you to share is more about the Asian culture, because yes, I'm Australian Chinese as well. My parents are from Malaysia. I would say, as I shared with you, that I don't think my parents were super strict, but I really stood my ground as well. But I do see a lot of Asians go out there with a lot of pressure. But can you give me your view on the Asian culture? Because I think it's good for other people to understand, because we both live in very multicultural societies.
Totally. Yeah, like I said, I think generally speaking, and if you look from the outside in, the Asian culture is quite conservative, and we are about respect and honor, and we are taught very valuable values in my mind, in terms of like how to appropriately act in society and be. And I take a lot from that, as I grow up. Some things I feel are a little bit redundant, but this is, I guess, tradition in some sense. In terms of my immediate experience of it in my family, I'm quite similar to you in that my parents weren't overly strict, but there was like a sense of, when I reflect back, it was more like a pressure that I put onto myself, and that maybe from my aunts and uncle and my cousins. So, backstory: my parents sort of followed, my dad's sister over here from Hong Kong. So they came over first and sort of laid the platform for, more of their siblings to come over from Hong Kong. And my dad and my mum, came over and followed. And I had three cousins that were older than me, and academically they were like, 90 plus, the highest percentile. And I guess they had a lot of pressure on them put on from my aunt and my uncle. And, we spent a lot of time with them because we didn't have much family outside of those guys. So growing up, we'd see them like at least once, twice a week. And I'd always see these guys, doing so well academically and being praised for their efforts and their results. And, I felt like my own academic journey was like a conscious but an unconscious choice at the same time, in that I was a great student, top of the class up until I chose not to, and I think it was probably in year 8 or 9, from then onwards, I sort of like chose a different path. And like I said, this sort of plays into this needing validation and wanting to fit into like, different cliques and groups at school. That meant I needed to, show less commitment to schooling and all these sorts of things just so that I could fit in, right? And that was, one of those things that it sort of alleviated a little bit of like anxiety and like that need for validation for me, enough that I continued to chase it in different guises, right? So long story short, like just to wrap it, in terms of the question that you asked, there is a lot of inherent pressure I feel from being, of this cultural background, just because of the types of expectations, from a general standpoint, that are sort of stereotypically laid upon us. My parents were pretty cool, underneath that, just to say that, they really understood when I said that I don't want to waste their time and money for them sending me to university when I didn't want to do it. I truly knew that was something I didn't want to do. And they understood that, they didn't really want to break me in that way, I guess. So So yeah, it's one of those things. I think it was half. Like a lot of my story, I feel there were a lot of mental stories that had built up in my own mind rather than from direct influence and pressure.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel, were your parents supportive from a young age, especially around the emotional aspect? Or was it very much that you
Mm.
achieved through your results and working hard?
Yeah, I don't feel like there was a huge emotional connection, to be honest, growing up. Like I have a great relationship with my mum right now. With my dad, it's quite cold, and I think that's his sort of approach to things. He's one of those guys who's, he'll indirectly, praise you, and he won't, show emotion too often. And I sort of adopted that, I think, and I think that growing up, it was far removed just because they were working multiple jobs and they were hardly home. So that, I guess, that emotional layer wasn't really there. It was quite surface level stuff, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And did they make you learn piano and violin like most Asians?
No, actually, I think I was actually one of the few that actually didn't get. I actually had the choice not to, learn a musical instrument. I look back and I sort of regret it, but I wish they sort of did, but no, they didn't.
So you did go to university in the end,
Mm, yeah.
and you got into finance. Now, I feel like sometimes when people just give me their job title and don't elaborate with some excitement, and obviously you've told us that you hated your job, but you were good at it. I do sit there and go, do you actually like your job? Because it is such a broad topic. But can you just delve into what kind of finance were you in?
Yeah. So I was in superannuation and investments. So super exciting already. But in that space, I started off, entry level, and there was really a foot in the door. But I spent a couple of years just sort of floating around in administrative roles until I set foot into project management space, where I basically delivering projects for, I guess, regulatory changes within the bank and things like this. So just major changes that sort of impacted my division, which was the operations space. And outside of that, I guess I dabbled in quite a lot of management and mentorship and coaching and yeah, just generally in this space. And towards the tail end, there was a lot of technology as well. So, as technology became a bigger player in the bank. So yeah.
And was it just that you knew that this wasn't your path, or can you tell us a little bit more about what it was that you hated about it? Was it the environment, the people, the values?
Quite a lot of that stuff, actually. Look, to be honest, I went in there not knowing that it wasn't a calling. I went into taking the entry level job because I knew that there were avenues to climb and progress. And I think that was something that my parents really wanted me to, or see me do. So I did that. So much of the job really didn't align with my personal values, in that a lot of the people that I interact with, they care more about what affects the bottom line rather than what the right thing was to do. And I think this is something that, like, a lot of the time I sort of use that analogy of you know um, band-aid fixes versus recognizing root cause. There's a lot of that happens, and like, I understand that the decisions like that happen in big corporations, they're driven from the top down. But at the same time, you sort of lose sight of what the intention of each project or each action really is. At the end goal, we're trying to help customers and make a better experience from them and things like this. But a lot of the time I saw that those sorts of values were swept under the rug. to make ends meet from a financial standpoint. So I didn't really agree with that. And, you know, a lot of that sort of just stemmed out through the way that I, you know, interacted. Like I said, I was very good at my job. I was successful as one of the, you know, most experienced project managers in my space for some time. And my voice was influential in some, like, you know, if you could say that, in some regards. But at the same time, a lot of people didn't like to hear what I was saying just because it was, I guess, controversial, and it didn't align with what was what the business overall is trying to achieve, I guess, when it comes to like the bottom line and things like this. So I tended to rub people the wrong way, especially towards the end of my tenure there. But to that, by that time, it didn't really bother me. I just really wanted to express my truth and like act in the best. I guess I wanted to act on behalf of who I thought we were trying to work for at the end, which was the client, and not so much, you know, trying to fill our pockets more and more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you take me through when the depression started to hit, or when you started to take antidepressants and get into the alcohol and drugs?
Yeah, I mean, alcohol and drugs was quite early. I started, I guess you start binge drinking in high school. So that was like, I think I was like 16 or 17, started smoking cigarettes and things like this. And I think that was more like at parties and things like this until it turned into something that was more regular. And that sort of played quite a significant part in most of my, you know, I would say most of my 20s, you know, up until I got diagnosed with cancer, up until I was 28 years old. I had stopped cigarettes earlier than that, but yeah, the drinking was quite consistent. With experimenting with drugs, again, it was probably early 20s when I actually started, and that sort of rolled on, you know, for quite a few years. And there were a few years where it was quite heavy, and I did it quite regularly.
What
All
sort of
the,
drugs?
you know, so I was smoking weed and cocaine and things like this. So yeah,
I speak to a lot of
doing.
people in the finance industry who seem to get into cocaine.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things. It's part of the culture a little bit, I suppose. So yeah, it was just one of those things that it seemed very, you know, off the cuff, that they would just say, you know, we're going out for drinks and we're just going to have a little bit of fun with cocaine and things like this. So, you know, it didn't feel too illicit or wrong or anything like this, especially in that space.
And when you
Um,
look back on it,
hmm.
knowing what you know now, why do you think you got into the alcohol and the drugs?
Oh, it's just to escape, to be honest. Like I said, I always had some sort of inkling, whether it was probably more like an emotional inkling rather than like an intellectual one. I really didn't understand what it was, and I didn't really care or didn't want to, you know, delve deeper to understand that a little bit more. So it scared me to have to face those sorts of things, because I knew that, you know, ultimately, if I'm reflecting back, it meant that some of these identities and the ego side of me would have been shattered, and I'd probably lose that. So I think ultimately, when I look back, that's why I sort of wanted to escape through those avenues, right? And it did give me momentary escape. So yeah.
Mm. I just have a random question for you. As an
Sure.
Asian, as a
Mm.
fellow Asian, can you tolerate alcohol?
I got pretty good at it. I got pretty good at it. Yeah, at the start I wasn't very good at it, but yeah, I got pretty good at
There's
it.
there's this well, I cannot tolerate it, and I just
Mm.
will not drink. I used to as a teen, but it was just
Mm.
so hit and miss. And I think I've only ever been happy drunk once, but it's the whole alcohol dehydrogenase enzyme. You're meant to have two, and a lot of I think Indigenous Australians, Maori Islanders, and Asians are lacking one of the enzymes. I'm definitely lacking one, if not two of them. My blood pressure will drop. I'll get sick. I don't know what's on the cards for me. Even if it's like a quarter of a glass, I don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, sometimes, and I go bright red, and I can see other Asians that happens to. And I'm like, I'm actually having fun.
Yeah, no, I got the red face. I got the red face, but I have like a dark complexion, so it was like easier to hide, I think. So,
oh, that's handy.
yeah.
Do you drink now?
No, I don't. So basically, since I got diagnosed with cancer, I haven't drank since. So it's been about 7-8 years now.
Right. We'll get into that a little bit more down the track. What about depression? Or now I just want to distinguish between depression and taking antidepressants.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And like, I guess my story is like the perfect picture of this, because like I said, I did feel like, there was something amiss in my life, but I never I was never I guess, overwhelmed from a mental standpoint in terms of these negative stories that I was telling myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, they were there, but I still operated relatively well. And I would say at a decent level. But they still swirled around in my mind, these defeating thoughts. And, I remember distinctly, I don't even remember how old I was, but I remember just going to the GP. If I had to put it, it must have been like in my early 20s or something. I went to the GP and I just said that I think I might be depressed. And he just asked me a simple, like 2 or 3 questions, do you always feel sad, or you don't feel like you have hope? And the final question was like, do you have you ever thought like suicidal thoughts? And, I couldn't really discern between thinking these suicidal thoughts, which I had, versus actually practically wanting to act that out, right? I never wanted to do that, but sure enough, like, I've thought about these things, right? So I just answered yes. And that was as easy as it was for me to get the prescription for antidepressants. And I can't remember what they were. I remember I just took them home, and I'm just like, hopefully this will make me feel better. And I took it for a few days, maybe a week. And I just remember feeling like my body was just completely rejecting it. Like, I just did not feel well. And it was the sign that just told me to stop taking this stuff, because I just didn't need it. And it was doing something to me that my body just didn't want. So it was a short stint on the antidepressants. And really it was like a Hail Mary for me, almost, just to say that, look, I feel like crap, and I want to get out of this rut. And I didn't know how. And I put my hands and my trust in the professional, and I just figured it wasn't for me. So life went on.
What do you think a better question would be for practitioners and therapists out there to ask someone who is in the position that you were in?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, when I look back, I feel like if I had a bit more, emotional awareness, then I would have been able to discern for myself, or at least explain what I was feeling a little bit more. I feel like the questions that were asked were very black and white, and then they were coming from an intellectual place, which is fine. I think like you need to be able to, explain it at an intellectual level, because that's what communication is for. But I think that there needs to be a deeper inquiry into, the root of it. And perhaps it's not the place of the GP to question, but perhaps it's like pointing me to someone who can, like a psychologist, or someone who can really converse with me at that emotional deep level, or lead me down that road at least a little bit, so that they can better understand where I'm coming from, and better, I guess, diagnose what it is that I actually had, which, who knows.
Mm-hmm. So just moving forwards to when you were 28 and you had that routine checkup at the doctor, when you look back, did you have any signs over potential cancer?
No, look, like I said, the only reason I went to get a checkup was, so a bit of background. When I was growing up, I always had nosebleeds periodically. Like every now and then I just get nosebleeds, and, you know, I'd go get a checkup at the GP. My parents would always like get me checked up, and just, it was fine all the way throughout my childhood and even into my teens and my early 20s. Like it never really stopped. So the thing and the symptom that sort of prompted me to go get a checkup was I had little traces of blood in my phlegm, but it wasn't a lot. So when I first noticed it, I was like, okay, I get nosebleeds every now and then, nothing to worry about. But it was persistent for about a month, day on day. So I thought, this is not normal. This isn't something that has happened before. So I better go and check it out. And that was the only real symptom. Like I felt healthy, I felt good. There was no real signs outside of that. So that was the only thing that pointed me towards getting checked out. And I had no idea that it would turn out to be cancer.
Mm. Can you tell us what sort of cancer it was?
Yeah. So it was called nasopharyngeal carcinoma. And basically it was a tumor in between my nasal passage and my throat. So in between that space there.
And what went through your mind when you got this diagnosis?
Oh, it was crazy actually. I mean, I was at work when I got the phone call, and I know I was waiting for the results of a biopsy. And I was at work and I was doing a presentation to a number of leaders, and I saw my phone started vibrating, and it was a random landline number, and I thought, okay, this is it. I need to take this call, and I had to stop mid preso, step out of the room, take the call. The doctor or the specialist basically apologized first for not telling me in person, but he had to tell me he was interstate for something, and he just dropped the bomb. And I mean, I was in disbelief. I just couldn't believe it. Like I said, I would never have thought that it was cancer. So um, it really shook me up. Like I just cancelled that meeting. I went home straight away, and really, I didn't have much time to emotionally, process what was going on. I just knew I had cancer. I've never really known much about cancer. So, because, not many of my, family or relatives have really gone through it, or have not known of it much. So I don't have much, indirect exposure even to it. So as soon as I heard the word, it was dire for me, cancer, for someone who doesn't know much about it, doesn't know, whether there is a survival rate to it, or whether there are levels to it, or stages rather. I just thought the worst straight away. I just thought the worst. So it was tough. It was like, one moment just living life quite autonomously, just going through the motions, and the next moment, in my mind, I was faced with my own mortality. And then, straight from there, I was thrust into 7-8 months of cancer treatment. There wasn't much respite from there. It went, straight into that. So again, I really didn't have much time to process the whole experience until, much after, once, treatment had finished and I was in that mode of recovery.
Mm-hmm. What else was happening in your life at that time?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I always tell the story like, a couple of weeks prior to the diagnosis, I had just purchased my first property with my then girlfriend, now wife, and I had just got the promotion that I felt like was the dream job for me. So things were, seemingly looking up, but I guess the prospect of just having signed my name against a mortgage and then having to take 7 to 8 months off work was a bit of a worry, and something that built a bit of anxiety in myself. But yeah, those are like, I guess, like the major things that were happening.
Mm-hmm. And so during this period when you were having the treatments, what was going through your mind? Was this the turning point in your life?
Um, it was just strange. I mean, firstly, it was just like an interruption in the rhythm that I had, like, like I said, been going through the motions. This 9 to 5, living for the weekend, escaping on the weekends, getting drunk, and all this sort of thing, and then jumping back into the fray. Um, that quickly changed to, I didn't have to go to work anymore, but every day for the first 30 odd days I had to go into radiotherapy and get radiotherapy on the area, and then after that I'd have to go see the oncologist and get my chemo done. And after the chemo I was just at home, and like I just had so much time on my hands. And my dad was looking after me. He took time off work to look after me. And yeah, it was just a complete different sort of space that it put me into. I found a little bit of space in there, and I was able to reflect a little bit. And that's when it started sort of moving for me. And I think, it wasn't a particular point in time. It was quite gradual, like most things are in terms of revelations like this. But as a young man going through the treatment, I was assigned a psychologist as well to sort of help me through the stress and anxiety of everything that comes with cancer. And she recommended meditation to me, and it was the first time that meditation was something that that I had really dabbled in it. And it took me about 18 months on and off to develop a consistent practice. But this was really, when I look back, the foundational tool and practice that I took that has truly transformed my life to the life that I live now today, in being someone who builds and designs and teaches meditation, and like builds workshops, and has an online program and things like this. So yeah.
And that came out after the cancer diagnosis. Did you return to work, or did you transition into?
Yeah, I returned to work. I returned to work after treatment, and I stayed there for, probably another 5 odd years before, I practically put in place the things that I needed to do to, exit corporate. So, like I said, I was still, I guess, cognizant enough to understand that I couldn't just get rid of this job that was sustaining my life, plus not knowing exactly what I wanted to do with my life. So it was a very slow process of transitioning out of my corporate job to, founding my own business and running my own business and things like this. It was a long process. I started simply writing every day, and I created a blog, and I put that up every day for, I think, about 18 months. I wrote one piece every day for 18 months. And that's how I sort of started. Like, this was just like a cathartic process for me to sort of inquire within, really unpack these old stories and just understand what was going on inside me, outside of the noise and, busyness of the outside world. And that sort of like opened a lot of doors for me, like in terms of my mind and my perception and how I saw the world in front of me and how I experienced it. So,
I want to go back into the cancer diagnosis a little bit.
mm.
I'm curious as to how your parents reacted, and has that then resulted in any change in your relationship?
I think it's with my mum. She was pretty indifferent most of the time, but she was like obviously she was upset for me, and she was quite helpful throughout the whole process. With my dad, I feel like he's one of those people who sort of faces like hard times with just like I guess the guise of strength, and we'll get through it. And he was quite cold, I would say, when we first sort of told him about it. He was sort of just like, it's happened, just deal with it type of thing. without showing much emotion behind it. And it sort of hurt me at that time. I can recognize that, I was wanting a little bit more from him emotionally, like support wise. And then I look back, the whole time that he was sort of caring for me full time throughout my treatment process, he was very caring and nurturing. But then to me, it became like quite overbearing. I truly just wanted my own space when he wanted to be the guy that, was the help, essentially the guy that held my hand and lifted me out of this dark time, so to speak. But all I was truly after myself, what I found was, just a bit of silence, some space to myself, just to unpack what is happening. So I think that sort of hurt our relationship a little bit, to be honest. And, since then, I have made peace with that and forgiven him because I understand where he's coming from. I understand the person that he is and how he is based on what I know of his upbringing. And I don't judge him for that. I just know that he cared for me at the end of the day, and he had a way of doing it. It was, abrasive to me, but each to their own. I can't expect him to do what I wanted him to do or not do. So yeah, I mean, I've, made peace with it and forgiven him, like, at least in my own heart. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's one of those milestones that I say I know when my client has done the deeper work is when they come from a place of understanding as to where the person who perhaps hurt them or annoyed them no longer does anymore, because they truly understand and they see them for exactly who they are.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so the other thing was you mentioned that the cancer diagnosis, you see that as quite a fateful event in your life. I just had to think about that. Sorry.
That's all right.
Can you tell us why you feel it was a fateful event in your life?
Oh, look, I've had so much time to reflect on it and talk about this that when it boils down to it, the story that I tell about my origin and like how it sort of culminated to that point, it really was that point in the road where I simply couldn't ignore anymore. You know, I've had, like I said, like I explained, so many little moments that I can recollect in my life, in my formative years, where I could have turned and faced the questions, the hard questions, and really inquired within and really, sought some sort of deeper emotional understanding of who I was. But I didn't want to, or I just chose not to for whatever reason at the time. And, if you don't learn the lessons that, the universe is serving you, then it's going to continue to come back until you learn the lessons. And I always say that that was the one that I simply could not ignore because, like I said, it's a pretty tough one that really pulled the rug from underneath my feet and just turned my world upside down. All the other ones just seemingly weren't impactful enough from my perspective, I suppose. So yeah, it was an absolute blessing in disguise. It was one of the greatest moments of my life, I would say. And I say that all the time to people and they are kind of shocked. But, if I didn't have cancer, I would probably still be doing what I was doing back then and being miserable and living a miserable existence and truly not knowing much about who I was underneath this, like, pretend persona of high flying businessman.
Hmm. And would you say you're a different person? I think we'd change every day, but are you a
Yeah.
significantly different person to who you were when you were 28? And how many years ago is that now?
So 28, it would have been about 7, 8 years ago.
Hmm.
And 100%, I'm a different person. Like you said, I'm a different person every day. And I truly look back to the day that has passed and I'm a different person. But looking back, prior to my diagnosis, absolutely, I was a different person, and that sort of is evident through the things that I do, the company that I keep, and the amount of people that used to be in my life back then for all a myriad of different reasons who no longer feature in my life, for me to just protect, I guess this level of energy that I now hold within my life. So yeah, absolutely, it's I'm a absolutely different person from prior to the diagnosis.
And what about your relationship, if you're allowed to share your side of the story, because your wife isn't here with us?
Mm.
What about that? Because that's quite a significant thing for her to go through as a supporting partner,
Yeah.
and to support you through all of these life changes as well. Are you able
Yeah.
to shed any light from your side?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she's been really supportive. She's always been a very supportive person. And I always reflect upon this as well in terms of like how much a relationship can teach about you and vice versa. And I think that we spoke a little bit about this on our podcast. And I think that, it's a reciprocal thing, and it needn't be necessarily intimate relationships. But I think when I look back, even to the point where I got diagnosed, like the thoughts that were going around in my mind in terms of the relationship was like, oh, is she going to leave me now because she doesn't want to like be with this dude who's going to die from cancer or something like this? That was like my immediate thoughts on the day of diagnosis. I remember I went back to her place, and that was the types of questions I wanted to ask her. But even to this day, like supporting me emotionally through this whole change, like understanding that my own priority no longer lied in anything outside of myself. I think that's a lot of the time that's tough for people to hear, especially in a intimate relationship. When I was basically saying that I am my number one priority and not anything else. Nothing else can can be higher than that, and my commitment to that. When she understands that, and I think from a egoic sense, I can understand if that would be hurtful, if someone said that. And even me transitioning out of a very well-paying job into running my own business, that transparency, I'm obviously not making as much as I did in the financial industry, not by any stretch, but the smile on my face and the amount of joy that I feel in every moment of my life is just, you cannot compare it. She's supported me through every iteration of who I am and who I was and who I'm becoming, unconditionally, which is awesome. It's really cool. It's one of those things that really have grounded me, and because I always say that the path that I'm walking and the rabbit holes that I'm exploring, I could really go down deep if someone didn't hold me back, and really pin me down and anchor me into like some semblance of reality. So she has been that for me throughout the whole process, which is great. And I think that she herself has grown through the process as well. You must also grow together, I think. Otherwise, there's always going to be naturally a progressive growing apart if you don't grow together. So yeah, she's grown as well. I think not without conflict, I guess, but I think that in itself is also a necessary part of a healthy relationship in terms of really expressing oneself and penetrating that egoic way of thinking, just to really just express and try to be honest and understanding and transparent, simply to share one's point of view as best as possible. So yeah, it's been not without its twists and bumps and all that sort of thing, but I guess we wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Oh, she sounds like an amazing person.
Yep, for sure.
So you were exposed to meditation through a psychologist, and now you're kind of dedicating your life to this. But from what I understand, it's not just solely meditation.
Yeah,
Can you
that's
tell
right.
us a little bit about what you think this life is all about?
Yeah, I think meditation has really taught me a lot, and I take a lot of the principles that are involved in meditation and apply that in everyday life. And it's not so much just about sitting and you know quote unquote doing nothing. I really feel like there's a level of ignorance when people think that meditation is doing nothing, because when you intentionally and consciously choose to sit and meditate, that is an action in itself. Um, but what it has taught me is really, I guess, a level of discipline to the practice, and not so much the practice of meditation necessarily, but the practice of life. I think each moment is an opportunity for us to practice something, and there's so much that can be told in that. But I refer to a lot of Eastern philosophy, and I really resonate with Zen Buddhism. I spent some time living in Japan for a short stint in a Zen Buddhist monastery, in a very remote fishing village, and it was really that moment that birthed Finding Space, my quote unquote business. But a lot of what I guess I learned through I guess Zen Buddhism and their teachings is that there's not much to life, but there is a whole lot as well. Um, and if we can grasp, I guess, that fact that it's as simple as we want to make it, and as colorful and beautiful and deep as we want to, explore, then it is simply up to us to be able to, unravel that experience of life for ourselves and live that in each and every moment of our lives. So although I teach meditation and I'm a big advocate and practitioner of it on a daily basis, it is by no means the only thing that I feel I represent or advocate for, because it is just one of the tools and vehicles that really teach us how to live a better life, in my mind. So
Can you give us some tips with meditation?
yeah, I mean, where do I start? I mean, firstly, I think we have to sort of debunk the fact, all the stereotypical views and misconceptions of what meditation is, right? Meditation doesn't necessarily need to be, in a beautiful setting when you're in, on a high mountain that's remote and sitting in the lotus position with your hands on your lap and chanting Om, right? It doesn't need to necessarily do that. You don't necessarily need to, be in that posture at all. You don't even need to close your eyes, or it's really just about noticing and paying deep attention, like deeper than what your intellectual eye, sees, right? And it's about training that in any moment in life. So every moment can be a meditative moment if you, practice this. Like, you can walk through life and see it through a lens of meditation if you are practiced enough in it. Um, so I guess at the start, we must first debunk the fact that, meditation is about sitting and de-stressing and, getting better sleep and all these sorts of things. Like, of course, these are beautiful benefits of meditation, but it's not what it's about in my mind, right? It's really just about cutting through the noise. And I just love the analogy of, if we and our minds represented a cup of muddy water, and it's continually being stirred and stirred and stirred and stirred, well, it's moving at quite a fast velocity, and you won't be able to see much within this swirling cup of muddy water. But if you just let it still and sit still and stop stirring, eventually it'll come to rest, and all the dirt will, sink to the bottom, and you'll be able to see clearly all the way down to the bottom of the cup. So I think that is a great analogy and way to sort of paint the picture of what meditation is, right, for me, in my mind. So I personally, when I first am asked about any tips for beginners and how to start meditation, I just say, look, don't get overwhelmed by it. Like, people are like, oh, I don't want to sit for more than like 10 minutes and things like this. Start with 5 minutes and, don't even think about meditating. All I want you to do is have two things, that you practicing. Just sit and breathe, and it's as practical as that. You're not even trying to meditation at this moment. You just want to sit and you just want to breathe. And, slowly, once you start to notice what happens within your body, even for a 5-minute period, if you did that for, 30 days straight, I guarantee you there will be some, change in your perception of how you see the practice. And perhaps it'll pique your curiosity to practice for a longer stint and then, explore what else you can within your body that occurs as you are in this still state, and your mind, starts to, not necessarily quieten, but you will be aware enough to notice the thought and see it pass by. So yeah, it's just one of those things. It's very hard to teach in my mind. In my program, I start off with something similar, an entry level for the first module. It is about, doing something similar as I just, described, just to get someone really connected from an emotional and visceral standpoint first, and I call it just dropping out of your mind and into your body. And if we can do that as a starting point, then you peek your foot into the door of meditation.
Yeah, I like that. It is just getting your foot in the door with it. And as you say, I'm sure you're a great teacher at it, but it is the experience. And we can hear about how to do it over and over again, but actually you've got to get out of your head and you just have to experience it and see what happens.
Yeah, 100%.
My only exposure, or not my only exposure, actually, it was my dad who I think he had like a second lease on life. And I remember him learning how to meditate and going to these Buddhist weekends away, and staring at a candle flame. There's so many different methods out there. Yeah. But my first proper experience myself with meditation was Vipassana meditation. And that is quite full on for a lot of people. And I now know with all the work that I do, and I personality type my clients, I know the ones where it's going to be too much for them, but I still like to let them know about it so that maybe they can dip their toe in and try that out. But I say there's so many different meditations out there. Just try whatever comes up for you and see if it resonates, but give it a go.
Totally.
But I remember being in Vipassana. I've done several and did one when I was pregnant. And my first one, I was like, this is amazing. If the whole world meditated, we would not have issues because we would become so much more aware of our physical body and our emotions. And all the answers come to us. But I think
Absolutely.
maybe it does take some people a few Vipassanas before they get to that stage, and some people never go back and try again. But I remember meeting people with chronic pain who had gone to see all the best specialists out there. And after a meditation session, they were highly aware of the sensation, but they didn't react to it. Like they didn't move out of the position. And because they sat there for an hour, they got up, something released, audibly cracked in their body. And then it's like everything just clicked into place like dominoes for them.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that happens with every time you go to a Vipassana, but I've heard numerous stories like that. So I always love talking to people on day 11, whenever it is you're allowed to open your mouth, and just hear people's stories and their experience. And I think some people crave, and, we learn in meditation not to crave or have aversions and want that other person's experience. But sometimes you just have to keep going, and that's your journey. And I think a lot of people set unrealistic expectations on themselves. So I personally don't meditate right now, although you talked about just sitting and breathing. And I remember coming out of my accounting meeting yesterday and feeling a little bit stressed and going, I just need to sit and breathe as I drive home and just try and embody the state of calm that I know that I can that I can elicit in myself. But yeah, I don't put pressure on myself to go and meditate for an hour morning and night, which is the Vipassana way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, 100%, like you said, I mean, there's so many things that I want to touch on, like based on what you just mentioned, but you know, a couple of things, like in the way that I teach, it's not necessarily any sort of particular, I guess, doctrine or methodology of meditation. It's really just based on my lived experience of what I thought were the foundational principles that teach every individual to some degree, just to highlight the cues that we should maybe look out for more on a sensory, visceral, emotional level, as we are giving ourselves the space to do so through meditation, to be able to be aware. And once we find those, then let's be curious about them, you know, follow those threads and see where they take us, you know. Like you said, in any sort of instance, we are given the opportunity to meditate. Like some parts of my program, I sort of explain, like, you know, if you're washing the dishes, you know, it can be just a task of washing the dishes, and you're sort of wanting to just get through the process of, you know, cleaning these dirty dishes. Or you can hear the water as it comes out of the tap, and you can see as the water changes trajectory, as it hits like a spoon, you know, and cascades down, and how that changes the sound of the water. And then you can hear like the subtle little bubbles and suds just, like, you know, crackling away in the background. And all these sorts of things, there's like so much nuance in everything that we can do and possibly do, you know. Even when we're driving and things like this, there's a difference between us like just trying to speed away and being conscious of time to get to the next meeting or whatever, versus really being aware of what is happening around us as we're driving. You know, the feeling of our butts in the seats, and our hand on the steering wheel, and, you know, the different sounds that are occurring close within the car, and the sounds that are occurring, you know, far away outside of the car. And then, you know, the most advanced like sort of techniques is, like you said, about, you know, acknowledging sensations like pain, and as just another bodily sensation, no different to anything else in your body, right? Once you can sort of see pain in your body as simply another, you know, just another sensation that you feel, you know, outside of happiness and, you know, sadness and anything else, a physical sensation that you feel, it just becomes another point of focus for you as you meditate, and a point of inquiry as to why you might be feeling that way in that particular part of your body as you're sitting, you know, at the 45-minute mark, you know. So it's really about just getting real deep, and, like, you know, exploring the world within yourself, really, I feel.
Yeah, I was just smiling when you were talking about washing the dishes, because I was thinking this morning that I know when things are super calm in my life, because I actually enjoy washing the clothes, not physically washing them, but, you know, putting them in the washing machine and then hanging them up, and not just like biffing in them on the line, and like hating seeing the piles of washing just overload me and overwhelm me. So yeah, that's when I know I'm in a good space, when I can actually appreciate and I enjoy hanging the clothes on the washing line, rather than thinking, God, I wish I could hire someone to just do my washing and fold it and put it away for me.
I always say that that's, like, again, it's part of the practice, and a way for you to, like, you know, recenter and just be aware of those. You know that, like, you know, doesn't matter what task it is that you're doing. Like you said, washing the clothes and hanging it out on the line. You know, you are capable of feeling joy within, you know, those tasks. Like, I felt that and first understood it whilst I was, you know, taking the clothes off the line at the Zen Buddhist monastery when I was doing the work there. And I was just folding the towels into these, like, beautiful crisp squares, and they were all aligned. And, like, I felt like there was, like, a moment of, like, just, you know, I was right there, enlightenment almost. It was so joyful. And I was just folding towels, you know. So every moment, like, no matter how difficult, like, quote unquote, things might be, I think that, like, you know, understanding, like, labor is a critical part of, everyday life is like, it's really a beautiful thing.
Oh, it definitely is. Is there anything else you want to share before I go into how people can find you?
Look, I don't traditionally like to sort of feel like I'm marketing myself. All I will offer is, I guess, if anyone resonated with anything that I've said and feel to, I guess, inquire further and want to connect with me, I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to share some of my details and where they can find me and things like this. I do have things going on, but yeah, I think it's really important that that I represent myself in this way, and that I'm not necessarily trying to use this as any form of marketing platform. I just share my truth, and if people resonate with that, then beautiful. But if not, then that's also beautiful. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think what you've shared is very interesting, and I think it will speak to the people out there in finance who are good at their jobs but absolutely hating it, and just getting them to reflect on where they could be if they continue down that path, and hopefully don't end up with, a diagnosis that makes you face your own mortality, as you say. So I would love you to share where it is people can find you.
Yep,
Because you
for
do,
sure.
yeah, you share lots of interesting information. And I think meditation is a really core part to healing yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I just want to say thanks for the invite. Really like talking with you, and I think that you and I do resonate with you and the message and the work that you do. So thank you for the platform, just for me to share my truth. People can find me at my website, findingspace.co. You can find out about my meditation program there, as well as my one-on-one mentorship programs. I do only mentor a limited number of people per year, just so that I'm able to give the adequate attention to each individual. But yeah, you can inquire about that through my website, and anything else that is sort of coming up for me. Whether it's on Instagram and Facebook as well. My handle is @findingspace.co. And I guess the last thing that I might share is the new program that my podcast co-host Sean and I have recently launched is the True North program. We're sort of running a small, intimate, transformational program that runs over 6 weeks to essentially help people prepare for the journey of self-inquiry and self-exploration. So if you want to find out more about that, it's the details at true-north.co.
How long's that program?
It's a 6-week program.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And is it open to men and women, or do you just work with men?
Yep, open to men and women. And I guess the important thing is it is by application only. We only take a limited number of people just to make sure that it is interactive and intimate. But like I said, application just to ensure that you are in the right place for us to be able to guide you along this journey. So open to men and women by application only. And there was one other point that I wanted to make is that, yes, we run multiple cohorts throughout the year. So just check the website to find out when the next cohort is launching.
Cool. Sounds great. And I'm sure that if it's not the right fit for them, you'll point them in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time, Leslie, and sharing your story.
Thank you for the platform again. Thank you.
Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. You can join my free Facebook group where I go live regularly to teach you about different conditions and the deeper underlying emotions at play.